First, introduce yourselves one at a time.
Hi, I'm Guy Lagacé from Ottawa.
Chelsea Walsh from Ottawa, co-pilot.
And what was it like actually joining Gumball? How do you even go about that? And once you've done that process, what is it like building up on the days leading up to the rally?
I guess I'll start off at my end. It's something that I've added to my bucket list probably, I'd say 5-6 years ago. But in true facts, my bucket list was just to apply. It was not really to make Gumball. I didn't think it was a possibility. I know it's really hard to get in, and it was just a bucket list just to apply. So about a year ago, I went with a friend to a venue, and he just mentioned out of the blue, hey, we should do Gumball together one day. So that inspired me to actually make my bucket list a reality in regards to applying. So when I got back to Ottawa, I jumped on the website. It didn't have this year's Gumball available yet, so I kept checking every couple of days or so on, and eventually I saw the Gumball was open to apply. So I went ahead and started the application. It was quite lengthy. I think it was 3,000 words discussing about me. I think it was 1,000 words to talk about the car, and there's a few other paragraphs they want you to elaborate on it. I sent the application. I want to say maybe within a week or two, Gumball sent me an email and said, hey, we got your application. We are interested. We'd like to do an interview. So let's do it, right? So it was, first interview was a telephone interview. I spoke to one of the organizers. We did a quick interview about what Gumball was and asked me what Gumball was in my application. I thought that was it, right? So then shortly after, I think it was a couple days after, he asked me for a meet interview via Zoom, I think it was, so which I agreed. And again, I did the whole process, them asking me questions, what Gumball was out, what it was about, what I wanted out of it. So I answered all those questions. And then again, I thought that was it, done, check mark. And then I think on my birthday, a couple days after, which I remember is November 27th on my birthday, I was driving to Montreal. I got a call from him letting me know that I got invited to come to Gumball, and I had 72 hours to send him the deposit. At that point, I kind of had an idea of what Gumball cost. I wasn't completely sure, but then reality kicked in and say, oh shoot, I gotta kind of find that $80,000 deposit to be able to secure my spot. So I accepted, but to be honest, I accepted. I didn't really know what I was going to do, where I was going to find this money, or how I was going to make it happen. It just snowballed, and I made it happen, and I was able to send in that $80,000 deposit and put my name on the list, or get my spot secured, right? So and that's when we went on with there. I prepared mentally, I bragged about it, I was excited. Not long after, we set the second deposit full. Again, we were ready. I had a partner that inspired me to do it, so he had the right of refusal, so I gave him the right of refusal. He accepted, so initially it was me and this particular person. We're going to do the Gumball together. But at the last minute, for personal reason, this person withdrew their candidacy. So 7 days prior to Gumball, I was by myself. I had no co-pilot minutes. And Gumball's not the type of thing you do by yourself. It's definitely a team duo. So I was faced with finding somebody within 7 days, somebody that could financially do it, somebody that emotionally could handle it, able to handle me, because I'm not always easy to handle. Not afraid to go really fast in my car, compliments, keep me out of jail. There was just a ton of requirements that pretty much could not check off anybody. I just kind of threw it at Chelsea at that point. I knew she checked off most of the boxes, if not all. But I didn't think it was a feasible thing for her, so I just kind of threw it at her just to kind of almost like, hey, you want to come to Gumball with me? This is the parameters. You fit all the parameters. What do you think?
And I remember him asking me, and I was like, okay, there's two different things here. Are you asking me like hypothetically, or are you actually asking me? Because those are two completely different questions. And then he's like, no, I'm actually asking you. And I was like, and so for me, there's one thing I want to cover though that he didn't. And this is a really big deal, because before I was even in the picture, like all of Ottawa knew that he was going. Like, this is a big deal for people. Like, I've personally followed this since I was 18. I started in cars when I was 16. I started to understand what this rally was when I was 18. So it's been like a bucket list, crazy aspirational goal for my whole life. It's one of those things though that you never actually think that, at least for me, I never actually thought I would even get the chance to know somebody who was going. So we all in the car community arguably knew that Guy was going, and this was a big deal. And it's the first car from 613 from Ottawa to ever go. Yeah. So immediately I was like, this is a crazy deal. So the fact, this is gonna make your ego explode. The fact that I even knew somebody that was going, who I was friends with, like, that's crazy. Super supportive. And I feel like Ottawa, generally speaking, was really excited. So then when he called me, I was like, what? And it's funny because I had just come off a week of vacation, and the day that he asked me was the day before I left for a conference in Toronto, and I was like, so I was basically off the next week. And so maneuverability to try and do something like this at very short notice is not wrong. That you have to meet a lot of criteria, but you also have to be able to get the time off if you work for somebody else. Not everybody works for themselves. So I remember hanging up the phone, and I was like shocked. The other thing is, and I think this is an important piece of the story, is that, like, at least for me personally, it may feel the same way, but for me, like, the amount of stuff that had to fall apart in my life and fall together in my life for this exact set of circumstances to happen was uncanny. Like, it's people who know me personally will know that, like, there were certain big things that happened that were really not great at the time that ended up being the best opportunity that I was ever able to take. So I don't know, I think I said yes to you right on the phone, but I was like, maybe give me 20 minutes to process what you're asking me. But for me, it was a no-brainer. I had never known anybody who went. It wasn't even a reality, and now all of a sudden we're in the conversation. And then the lead up for me, I mean, I was way behind Guy in terms of, like, okay, now I have to wrap my brain on, like, how do I help him the best that I can, but also how do I make sure that I have my own stuff together so that I'm not in his way and I'm supporting, as opposed to being a pain in the ass, which I'm sure he would argue that I was some of the time, but I tried to keep it to a minimum. So it was a lot to process. In the conference in Toronto, I remember I did my best to focus, but the entire time we're, like, processing registration forms. And I remember sitting at this beautiful conference and having my laptop in front of me with Gumball registration forms on it, like, almost in tears, and people going, like, because I'm usually pretty invested in my work, and I was, for anybody watching this who works with me, I was for sure, but there's Gumball registration forms on my laptop, and I'm trying to listen, but at the same time I'm like, I can't believe I'm filling these forms out, and I can't believe, like, I'm having to look into insurance for this. And so I don't know, it was a huge honor to even be on that list for Guy to call. The other thing I'll say is that there's a lot of trust and a lot of friendship that goes into something like this. Like, this didn't just happen. I've known Guy for, I think, over a year now. In the big scheme of things, that's not very long, but especially from a driving perspective, like, drivers know, and especially if you're a passenger as a driver, the amount of trust that has to go into something like this. And Guy and I would never, I would say, at least from my perspective, I would have never been in this situation with him unless literally the 8 weeks prior to that, I don't know what started it, but we went to some Montreal Ferrari events, then we went to Race the Half, and then we went to Ferrari F1. And so, like, there was a bunch of situations that happened in a relatively short period of time that either put me driving in a separate vehicle with Guy and a few other people, or as a passenger with Guy. There's no way that I could have ramped into this experience without having that under my, I just wouldn't have done it because I wouldn't have trusted anybody. So anyways, I think that's an important part of the story. There's, like, a lot of pilot trust in a crazy rally like this. So
again, back to the preparation you mentioned. So there was a lot of preparation. There was a lot of modifications I wanted to do to the Ferrari. I didn't want to show up with just a regular SF90. I wasn't going to Gumball to blend in. I was going there to make a statement. I felt the SF90, being that it's a beast in itself, might have blended in. So the performance upgrades that I did, the exhaust, the tune, the body mods, was to make a statement. We knew that we were representing Canada, we were representing 613 Ottawa, and we were going to make a statement, and that was the plan from day one. And that's why there was a lot of preparation, getting the car ready, reliable, flame throwing, loud noise. Those were all things that we wanted to bring to Gumball, and we'll talk about it later, but I think we succeeded on that aspect of it.
So going off what you just said regarding the mods that you made, did you run into challenges, like any mechanical or powertrain problem, the hybrid system, during the rally itself, or did everything go to car?
Oddly that you say that. The SF9 is rumored not to be the most reliable. It's a very high technology hybrid machine of 1,000 horse. It ran like a dream. The people that helped me prepare it, Haute Concierge, some friends of mine, Etienne, they really well prepared it. We did some testing. I'd run the half a couple of weeks prior, but the car ran amazingly, except for the fact that when we got to Mexico, we didn't have the right fuel. So we had 87 octane, and the elevation did throw an engine light at one point, but soon we put octane boost. The engine light went away, and it ran mint. There was no hiccups, no reheating, no issue. The car did not let us down, so it was pretty impressive. So yeah.
I'd add to that like I've been a Ferrari fan my whole life, unfamiliar with the SF90 until we started hanging out. And then I was like, this is a pretty cool car. After the mods and after this rally, I can say that same thing. I've never been in a vehicle like, first of all, I wouldn't want to be on a rally like this without something that was exceptionally high performance. There's no way that you'll keep up, frankly. So combination of driver skill, but plus the vehicle, like it's one of the craziest vehicles I've ever seen in my life. And at high speed, when it just sits down and like, there's so many incredible, he'll talk about it more later, I'm sure, but there's so many incredible things about it that like, I honestly feel like I'm coming back and I didn't give it enough credit. And now I'm like, it's a whole different ballgame. It's funny because when I went to that conference in Toronto and I told him, I was like, I'm gonna stop by Ferrari. I don't know why I did it, but I had some extra time to kill. I stopped by Ferrari and in the front window was a yellow SF90. And I was like, and I appreciated it, of course. But now I think back to that moment and I'm like, I was like, that's an interesting like homage to what was to come and how much insane respect I have for that vehicle in general. So it's incredible.
And keep in mind, to elaborate on what you asked, there's about 100 cars. I'd say probably 30 cars didn't make it to the end, or some did make it, but not without assistance. You know, they did have tire repairs, rim repairs, engine issues, and so on. So I'd say about 30% of the cars did not make it to the end without having support. And we were able to make it from Miami to Mexico without any support on its own demeanor, which in itself, and in a Ferrari, it was pretty astonishing, right? So.
One more thing before we forget too is that the fact that he put straight pipe exhaust on it that throws flames, which the crowd absolutely lost their minds over. Whenever we had altercations with police or needed to quiet it down, being able to flip it into hybrid mode is the most insane hack of life. So I also don't know if that gets enough attention, but it's pretty cool to be able to swap flawlessly between both.
It's a pussycat or a beast,
yeah,
depending on what you want it for, right? So.
Speaking of police, what kind of legal troubles did you run into while you were still on the American side of the rally?
Well, I think I wore my plate very well. It's called my lawyer.
Bitch, we GBE, we just gon' say.
So obviously I wouldn't be driving that through 5,000 kilometers without stirring a little bit of a hornet's nest. And it didn't take long until we started. And I may add, one of Chelsea's primary responsibility was to keep me out of jail. She succeeded, but by the skin of her teeth.
You say that's not a small thing, okay? So like, there's a lot of responsibilities, but that's not a small thing.
Keep in mind we were excessive speed and excessive situations, so we did have some multiple altercation. I guess the first one was when Dee and I decided to test our boundaries and maybe a little bit of an East Coast West Coast Canada rivalry. So we both took on the challenge. Damien himself being a really good driver and being a very fast car himself. So we kind of back and forth and had a little bit of fun, but maybe a little too much fun. At one point, we decided to fuel up our cars. We needed some fuel, and by the time we got to the gas station, we slowed down. By the time I actually came to full stop, I looked around and I had 5 state troopers around my cars, and they quickly came to my window. And the first thing the police officer told me that that was racing, and in the USA, that is a misdemeanor level 2. An arrestable offense. So as I had 5 cars surrounding my SF90, I had threats of being arrested in a country that I'm not from, right? So,
in Texas specifically, actually, Texas, those guys don't mess around. So
I had the fear of God in my eyes, I'm sure, in my heart. But Dave from DDE came a little bit to my rescue. He came not giving me information that I didn't know. I probably knew the information, but it was nice, an experienced gumballer, kind of just being there supportive and kind of soothing the situation. Brought my anxieties down, my stress levels down, and he gave me some advice, which I took, which I knew, but I took. And shortly after, the police officer came and gave me my paperwork back and basically gave me a very stern warning that there wouldn't be a next time. If I got stopped again, there would be no past jail. I would definitely be arrested, and Chelsea's number 1 task would have been failed. So I think for the rest of the journey in the USA, we toned it down to a more respectful arrangements, I guess.
By like 3%. I say a couple things. One, Damon is a beast of a driver, and I know everybody watching is familiar with DDE, but Damon, that was really a highlight of my trip, to see Guy and Damon sort of like go at it, so to speak, and these guys, they didn't hold back. So I'm not surprised that we were surrounded by state troopers. The other thing is I think Guy got really maybe a little bit lucky with the female officer who was very probably charmed by his Canadianness. So I feel like that was a blessing in disguise that it was a chick who walked up to the truck. They were super nice though, but of course, when you pay this much money and when you invest this much emotion over like such a bucket list item, that there were multiple tickets on the rally. Obviously, one guy got a court date. Like there are a lot of things that can happen that can derail the trip. And so when we talked earlier about like even just finishing, let alone in the same car, like that's actually a big deal because not everybody did. So being arrested is, it's one thing if your car breaks down, it's another thing if you get arrested because you're playing too hard. So I was just grateful. You did a great job of handling that situation. I'm glad it was a chick. I'm glad he's right in saying that like Dave Coulter was really cool and calming and filmed the whole thing, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so anyways, that was Texas.
And that was just only our first encounter. We had a second encounter that I mistakenly forgot my passport at the first hotel in Miami. So at this point, we're crossing the borders. At this point, we need to cross the border, and a passport is required to cross the border in Mexico. And I'm a person that's organized, and I keep all my documents, and I triple check, and I'm usually that person, make sure everybody has their documents. And for some reason, I left it in a hotel. I believe in the safe. I left my freaking passport in a safe. So when we come across the border, the first document they ask, or the only document they want, is the passport. So at that point, I was sure I could kind of charm my way into Mexico. I did have other IDs with me, and I also had a picture, photocopy of my passport. So I assumed that would be sufficient. I did charm the best I could to do so. I even, offered some extra bonus to potentially let me in the country, all to fail. So that didn't work. We had to be creative on keeping the journey going. We did keep the journey going in a very creative way, maybe by bending the rules a bit, but we did get ourselves across the border into Mexico.
There was a super cool, I'll say, partnership moment. And nobody needs the details, but to the point of actually finishing the rally, like I will say that there was a specific point where I was like, I don't know if this is going to happen or not. And so again, that's sort of, I think we were both, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we were both probably thinking it, but we really try and channel like a positive mindset. We're like, we don't want to give up. But I think there was a period of time where I was like, I don't,
it's over for us.
I think this is done. And that would have been, I think Mexico was 3 or 4 days. It was like half the trip, right? So there's a lesson there in like, perseverance and partnership and trying to get people through difficult situations when you're trying to work through problems like that. So yeah, I'm not encouraging any shady behavior, but don't give up on the first pass, especially coming from a family who's like very risk averse. Guy as a friend has definitely pushed me to be, I think actually, not to again speak too highly, but has pushed me to be a better person, because again the partnership that we have has pushed me into some places where I'm like, even again being a pastor at 300 kilometers an hour that's a trusting thing. Same with how we problem solve the border and many other things. So I think coming out of this, I have a new level of respect for what actual friendship means, and I guess I had a high value on emotional intelligence and problem solving skills before, but this actually made me a better human being and a better person at work, because which sounds the irony of comparing Gumball to work, but I think it makes you a better person, because you can't plan for everything. And so you're completely out of your comfort zone, and you have to do some stuff just to make it happen, and you have to get comfortable with that very quickly.
Yeah. And that was only our second encounter, so that's not only the police encounters, believe it or not. You think after 2 that would be the end of it, but we had even a more serious encounter. So we decided we befriended some people that were local, some Mexicans, some a very popular influencer from Mexico, a car influencer. We kind of bonded with them. They knew the lay of the land. They knew the way we drove and liked our driving style. So they invited us to participate with them to take a kind of a shortcut to our end destination. So we agreed to take the shortcut with them. We felt safe enough, so we decided to go with them instead of the convoy. But luckily before that, we exchanged phone numbers in case we would get lost, because we're not taking the traditional way. So if we ever got separated, we'd be able to call each other to get back on track. So we exchanged numbers, not thinking 2 seconds of it. Here's my number, I took his, and life went on. And we went on for about an hour or two. And we went through a toll where typically a toll is when you get to stop, you put your money in the toll, and it's an opportunity to take off quickly, school the tires. And typically on the convoy, typically on the main drag where we're going, the police and the people on the sidelines waving us, cheering us on, and they're completely fine with that. They were expecting us, they were on board. But because we derailed off the path, the police there, which I didn't see, obviously, weren't so kind about me taking off and spinning my tires. So once we crossed that toll, I took a flick of the head and I saw lights behind me. So I wasn't worried at that point. I figured, hey, the police know we're here. They're on board. No worries. So he pulled us over, and our Mexican friends kept going. They slowed down, but they kept going and on a slow pace, waiting for us to keep up. As soon as I got out of the car, the police asked me to get out of the car. The first thing he asked me was for my passport, which unfortunately at that point I did not have my passport. And he was demanding the passport and all my paperwork, which I had all of my paperwork except the passport. So he was demanding it, and I was trying to use my Canadian charm again. And again, it didn't seem like it was going to work. And then Chelsea was being a nuisance and saying my phone was ringing. And I kept telling him, Chelsea, it's not the time. Like, I'm dealing with the police. I'm trying to charm my way out of a potential prison. Like, you know.
Meanwhile, I have an aggressive Mexican on the other side of the line saying, "Put him on the phone," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to be in between this." So please take the phone.
I complied. Eventually, I took the phone because I said Chelsea was pretty persistent about it, and I grabbed the phone and I talked to her Mexican friends, and they asked me if I was in trouble, and I said, "Yeah, it's not looking good." And they said, "Do me a favor and just hand over the phone to the police," which I was without option, so I handed the phone to the police, and they spoke in Spanish. I'm not sure exactly how the conversation went. All I know, after the conversation, the officer gave me back my cell phone, gave me back my paperwork, and sent me on my way. So I don't know what those conversations were or what type of influence these people had, but needless to say, we escaped another potential prison sentence. So Chelsea did achieve her goal for a third time into the rally.
This one's kudos to the Mexicans though, because his phone rang 3 times, my phone rang twice. And these guys, like, we know them from the rally, but we don't know them. And so the fact that they're super persistent, I think I got calls from 2 support vehicles and you got calls from the guys in the Porsches. Like, it was a really neat feeling. And I think, so one of the things is that you don't want to be like, hey, according to everything we understand, and we're pretty adventurous, and I think both of us have traveled a lot, and we're willing to take risks, but it's not necessarily a great spot to be hanging around by yourself with $1 million Ferrari in the path that we're probably not supposed to be on in the first place, because we took a risk to go with the guys who took the authentic way, right? So there was a lot that added up there to that situation. I say, like, every time we took off, especially when we got there the first day, like, staying with the convoy was a big part of it to get to wherever we were going safely. Especially at night. So anyways, it was an interesting situation, and I think there's only a couple times I've ever seen Guy's charm not pay off, and every situation in Mexico that we got into was one of those.
It's getting back to the Gumballer, and I don't know if we mentioned that, but the Gumballer is a family. It's another family. We're still in contact with most of the people. I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but it's truly a family. If somebody breaking down on the side of the road, they're stopping and helping you. If you get stopped by the police, they're calling you and trying to get you out of trouble. You know, if you need a truck to bring your bags, because that's something we haven't talked about, that we don't have space in our SF90 for bags, luggage, and all that extra stuff that we needed. We had other Gumball families come to our support. So it is a tight-knit community. Once you're a Gumballer, you're part of the Gumballer family.
So last question before we take a break really quick. How are the roads in general in terms just of road surface quality and weather? And were there any vehicles that had to tap out or get on a truck to avoid certain obstacles while you're still in the States?
There was. The States, the roads were what we expect and what we see here. So the roads were nice. There was some breakdowns. I think DDE's one of the car or 2 broke down. There's a few others that had some mechanical issues. But overall, I think the roads were well. Except for the couple of breakdowns, I don't think there was major issue. I think we had one accident on the U.S. side. I think we had one car that rear-ended into another car. But overall, the roads in the U.S. were well, so there wasn't much issue. Keep in mind too, there's a lot of Gumballers that took on only one half of the Gumball trip. They were comfortable enough to stay in the USA for different reasons, but one of the reasons was the roads. They didn't fear to go into the Mexican, being that they were probably not as well made.